where, and this is a tough one, but I will still say it because it's good to have goals. And let me say, I don't always do this, but to walk into that first rehearsal with your interpretation, not learning alongside of your students. When we're dealing with really simple music, that's more possible we can get away with it. And let me just say to you, when I work with a middle school choir and the score is quite simple, I don't spend exhaustive time studying the score. But if I'm conducting a Bach cantata, it is my expectation that I have devoted the time necessary to understand what the heck's going on. And even after I spend hours and hours and hours studying Bach cantata, I still sometimes say, what did you do here? I don't get it, right? But preparation. So preparation, score study is at the heart. When we study the score, we begin to anticipate challenges for our musicians. So how many of us can look at a score and identify, wow, there's a vocal technique issue that will emerge with that line. Let's think about O Love that we looked at earlier today, when the sopranos have, we can anticipate that they're going to carry too much weight, right? We look at the score and we begin to anticipate issues that will need to be addressed, and that comes only through study. It's a creative, ongoing process, so it's not one and done. Okay, with great music, I should say that. And it requires active reflection. Now, planning is the end game of preparation. Planning involves choices for instruction. So what are we going to work on today? Which pages? Those sorts of questions. And it would align with goals and assessment. I consider this to be a little more black and white. So if we're working backwards, if we know our Christmas Eve service is happening on Christmas Eve, then we are thinking, okay, I need to be able to have a dress rehearsal on this day, and then before that, I need to be able to run at least this half of it with the cantata without stopping, and then this half, and we pull it together. We work backwards, and that's planning. Okay, does that make sense? The distinction between the two? Okay. All right, so when we're studying our score, it's so important that we are brainstorming for the rehearsal moment, thinking that through. So brainstorming is the activation of the imagination toward a future action, characterized by pondering, reflecting, questioning, and connecting prior experience to current problems. How many of you have ever sung in a choir that sings out of tune? How many of you have led a choir that sings out of tune? Yes. All of us, our prior experience, the more experience we have standing in front of an ensemble troubleshooting intonation issues, the more adept we are at getting after it very quickly. When we start, we don't necessarily have a huge amount of tools. But after we've done the thing for several years, we have a better read on the causation of problem. Therefore, we can prescribe the issue. I know I've been to the doctor for certain things, and it really feels like a guessing game, right? Because they're like, you try to describe your symptoms, and the doctor's kind of guessing, you might try this treatment. But if you go to a really seasoned physician, then they're going to take the symptoms and get right to the heart of the issue immediately. And so that's very much what we do. We're physicians in the musical sense. So, how do we listen inside of the sound? Inside of the sound, rather than the surface level. What do you think that means if we're thinking about listening within the sound? Anybody want to take a guess? How many of us are an outer voice, a soprano or a bass? Okay, how do we hear the tenor and the alto? How do we hear the clarinet that's buried? How do we hear the cello? How do we do that? How do we listen inside of the sound, not on the outside, but on the inside? What are some strategies when you're approaching a texture that's complicated? How do you get to the point where you can hear inside of it? Yeah, listening. Knowing and working through those parts internally, right? Yeah, if I'm looking at a really complicated score, then, and we'll talk more about score study tomorrow, but you better believe that I'm singing and playing through every single part, so that when I'm standing in front of the ensemble, for me, I'm a soprano. I sang alto for most of my youthful life. And the bass is an outer voice, so for me, I always have to spend the most attention on the tenor because it's just out of my range, but it's not an outer voice. It's super easy for me to hear the other three, but I really work for that tenor. Does anybody else have a voice that's sort of harder for them to hear? Anybody? Might just be me, but yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so yes.
I'm the same way with the tenor, and in my choir, unfortunately, the tenors also can't hear their parts.
Oh, bless their hearts. Bless their hearts. Bless their hearts. This also is a question related to how do we develop what I will call a sound ideal. So our piece will begin here, and it sounds like this today. Can we have an end game oral image in our mind when we're in that first rehearsal? The sound ideal. And our sound ideal is going to be specific to our environment, right? So I will have a particular sound ideal for a middle school choir versus a graduate recital choir. I'll have a sound ideal for a high school treble group. That might be different than a children's choir singing a piece of treble music. The sound ideal, and so making sure that we are coming into the rehearsal process with that sound ideal in mind. Okay, so, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow. For those of you who are anybody here love theory? Anybody love music theory? Oh yeah, loud and proud, right? I love music theory. I had one professor who just opened my eyes to the power of analysis, the power of communication from our composers. And so for me, analysis is an exciting adventure because I get to learn all kinds of things and find Easter eggs from composers, which is way cool, way fun. But why is one of my very favorite questions. I love asking this question, why? And you can put most anything you want after that. So why did the composer choose this key? That's a basic question. In the middle school, in the Developing Voices session, we talked a little bit about this. Why do many pieces become published in F major? Why is that a common choice? We can also say that about F sharp major.
But F sharp major is harder for the emphasis to make it simple.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Just play it in G flat.
Yeah, so there's your solution. Right. F major is a common choice because it's easy to play on the piano. Even though it's one of the trickiest keys in which to sing. It's one of the toughest keys to keep in tune. So anytime that you approach a piece of music that's written in F, that's a cappella, it doesn't mean you throw it away, it just means you repitch it. And you'll be amazed at how the piece is changed instantly. And it has to do with the passaggio in the human voice, that those lifting points in F major are situated in really various places. So, we want to ask that question. If you come up with the answer, well, the composer didn't choose the key, the publisher did, and they chose it for that reason. So then I'm going to have further questions. It doesn't mean I don't do the piece, it just makes me check out what's the tessitura, what are the things, what are the implications for the choir. Why this text? Why this text? Why did this composer choose this text at this time in their life? Do we have who are our composers in the room? I shouldn't say do we. Do we have any composers in the room? Okay, all right. Well, then we'll just have to imagine their answers. Why this meter? Why this meter? We hope all of these things are totally intentional and have some kind of purpose or symbolic component. Why this harmony? Is it modal? Is it Aeolian or is it Dorian? That changes things. Why this tessitura? So when we're talking about tessitura, range of tessitura are very different. Tessitura is really more important to us than range is. It's where the bulk of the music is written. so much, and this is not necessarily germane to all of your environments, but in the collegiate conducting realm, so much music is being written right now in 8-part divisi, and it almost always situates the bass twos on an E, an F, a G right down there, and they function as a pedal, right? Yes, I see some nodding. That's not the most satisfying experience for bass tube, right? It's like, only occasionally we let them out of the basement to like pop their head out of the cellar, and they might get a word, and then they go back to, right? It's kind of fun to listen to, but it's not necessarily the best thing for them artistically. So look at the tessitura. Okay, and again, we'll talk more about this tomorrow because these two sessions are part and parcel. They are married. They are absolutely connected. Sound, harmony, melody, rhythm, growth, also known as schmerg. This is something I learned in Texas Tech. So if I have any Red Raiders in the room, this is something that they taught in the theory sequence. It's a clever little acronym to give you avenues for further inquiry. When you think you understand a piece of music, come back to the drawing board and look down in new avenues. So sound is the sound of the piece. What is the sound of it? Maybe it's very intense and direct. Maybe it's round. And maybe it's delicate, right? These are sort of quality judgments. Harmony, what's the harmony that's straightforward? What's the melody, rhythm? And growth means musical momentum over time. So how does the composer infuse growth into this piece of music? That will then give you parameters for the architecture of the piece, which should lead to your interpretation. Form leads to feeling. The form of a piece leads to feeling. Okay? So if we look at the structure and see A, B, A, C, A, that's going to change how we interpret that element of C where the repetition is broken. All right, back up. Visual mapping makes tangible the mental process needed to rehearse imaginatively. It documents the brainstorming of musical discovery, interpretation, and the generation of teaching strategies. So when we're in the process of studying our score, is there anybody who would be willing to share their score study process, and when they're looking at the new piece of music that they've decided to conduct, you've decided to conduct, what's the very first thing you do to analyze it? Yeah?
The common melody rhythm.
Okay, so melody and rhythm. You look at that melodic materials. Yeah, great. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, you had a rhythm. Cool. Okay, sure. Yeah. Yeah, especially if there's mixed meter. Good. And you're probably thinking about the constituents of your ensemble and their needs. That will be a particular challenge to prepare for. Yeah, leading them through the transitions. Yeah.
I could hear what she said, mine is rhythm, and it's because if I know certain rhythms are there, I just close the page because my people can't do it.
Yeah, and that's part of our job.
Trying to get them to, and I decided, oh, it's my best use of time, build
Yeah. And we have to be the arbiters of, if we give our students, our musicians, if we give them something that is beyond them, it will lead to a frustrating musical experience and they're not going to come back. And they will also not feel successful.
And I want to run away a couple times.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else want to share their process? Cool. Great. Yeah, so that form leading to feeling and to fly out, right? To look at the trees versus the forest. Anyone else want to share their process in terms of how they approach a score? Okay, great. Yeah, sure, those inner voices. These are all valuable things. I find that our approach to score study is often rooted in our own loves, our own experiences. So if you're someone who, let's say you are a percussionist, or were in a former life, you might be drawn to rhythm or time. That, like, some of us are really drawn to text, and so we might analyze the text initially. And some of us are really drawn to harmony. Oops, I did that yesterday or Tuesday. It's all blurring together. I had a Cinderella moment in that first session. Goodness, this tile is out to get me. For me, I go to harmony first. It's just fascinating to me, harmonic language, and then that leads me to form, because I get to understand where are our primary cadential moments, where are the significant seams, and so on and so forth. One of my colleagues here, Will McLean, he goes to text first. That's his first stop. So we all have our different pathways to get inside of the score. The most important thing is that you just go be exhaustive, start wherever the entry point makes sense for you, and some of you, the pragmatic self is saying, I gotta check the rhythm first, because that's like do not pass go, do not collect $200 for me. And for some of us, it might be a different sort of topic. It might be tessitura. But this, when we're studying the score, that's where we begin to develop our strategies. And as we study the score, we want to document them, we want to curate them, so that we are building essentially a body of rehearsal strategies that we will draw on when the moment presents itself in rehearsal. That's the preparation that is distinct from planning. So we're thinking through these things. And somebody was talking about singing through the parts. That's one of the things that we'll talk about with score study, that is so essential that we sing through every single part so that we understand and can empathize with the technical demand of what we're asking people to do. That we feel that, or we understand, what does it feel like to find a tritone in that moment? Is that something my musicians are gonna get right away? Maybe, maybe not. The visual map is not the plan. It charts a course for exploration in rehearsal. Okay, so first dimension. So we're gonna talk about interpretation. Has anyone in here had the privilege of singing or hearing Pergolesi's Stabat Mater? Yes, okay. So do we know the Stabat Mater text? So this is a text that is focused on the experience of Christ's mother, Mary, and the opening movement speaks to Mary's experience, and it opens with the sorrowful mother stood, and this is her experience standing at the foot of the cross at Christ's crucifixion. And so what we want to do is we go to this, and I've done this opening movement with collegiate musicians and also high school musicians. It's very accessible and very powerful. Let's approach, I'm going to play it for you and also show you the score up here. You'll see the score. I'm sorry it's not bigger. It's in those moments that I wish I had my bifocals, but I don't have them today. So I hope that you'll be able to catch some of it. I'd like for you to just make some observations as we listen to this regarding some of the composer's devices. So what are some of the devices that the composer uses to illustrate the experience of Christ's mother? And can we make some predictions? If you think about, if we're going to listen to something that's about Christ's mother standing at the foot of the cross, what are some predictions we might make about the piece of music?
Probably dissonance.
There'll be dissonance. Minor. Yeah, do you expect it to be fast or slow? Yes, a resounding slow. What's that? Okay, motivic. Right? Motivic. Any other predictions?
Maybe strong female voices.
Text painting, what else?
Maybe strong female voices.
Yeah, so yes, it's only for female voices.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful, it's largely two-part. It can be sung by two fabulous soloists. So if you have two incredible soloists in your church, then you want to do something that's give them something to work on. This is a great work. All right, so let's take a listen and take a watch. Can you kind of see the score? No, okay, well, then you'll have what I would call a pure listening experience. minor, we predicted treble, we predicted dissonant, we predicted all those things. He opens with that dissonance. So first of all, I'll just ask you a couple questions. What do you notice about how he handles, it's obviously motivically driven, and we have presentation of these motives, but how does he create growth in the piece? When we go back to our schmerg, how does Pergolesi create growth in this piece of music? Any ideas? Yeah.
The pulse and the continuo is exceedingly important.
Oh, good. Great, great. What do you think that's a reference to?
Well, I don't think it's just one thing.
Uh-huh.
I think it creates its own tension, but it harmonically shifts things because the other parts are responding to that pattern, which is part of that era of music.
Sure.
So, but I think singers sometimes ignore that pulse to their detriment.
Singers, more pulse. What are you talking about? All of the singers that I work with have a perfect sense of time. I'm kind of get one of these, I mean, what? Yeah, good. Yes, they do. And underestimate the importance of that, the saturation of the eighth note right there. Can we find any bars that lack eighth notes? That boom, 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 the walking bass, right? Cool, great, great observation. What else? Yeah. I love that you caught that. Isn't this amazing? He starts on an F in the alto. F, G, A. And it emerges through that chain of suspension that sort of unfolds like an avalanche inverted, right? Did you all catch that ascent? It's the ear doesn't know who's singing what. The voices are in lockstep. They're a dyad that are either like a second or a third apart, right? So you really can't tell who's singing what. It's just incredible. What does he do with the restatement of that when it comes back? How is it shifted? Okay, it's up. So now we're dealing with the inversion, right? So this is a chain of suspensions at the interval of 2 and 3, like a second and a third. He takes, and this time who gets to present the material first? Now we're dealing with the inversion of that interval. So now we've got these suspensions at the 7th and the 6th. Isn't that amazing? So cool. And for the voices, it's actually, I mean, it's difficult in some ways technically, but actually on the page, it's sequential. So we have a pattern, and it's a lot of stepwise motion. So it's a brilliant, brilliant thing because it sounds very complicated because it is on certain levels, but other ways it's very gettable. What else? What are some other observations about how a composer creates growth and musical momentum in the work?
Well, for every tension, there's a release,
Okay.
and it builds on that.
So when you have just the heaving, the tension and release, the inhale, the exhale, what do you think that's a reference to in terms of subject matter?
Pain,
Pain.
sorrow.
Think about how labored the breath was for Christ and how a mother, like I have a son, so for me it's like I can't even go there. I almost just went there just now. But the idea of watching your son experience that sort of grotesque, horrific end, right? But that
Empathy.
and he's written it in rhythmically with that persistent eighth and then that ya dong he do. Yeah, there's so much here. What else? Any other thoughts? Mm-hmm. Yeah. both doubling, there's both coloparte writing, and then also distinct lines. Yeah, great, yeah.
I hear it being augmentation of what I call the sign effect.
Mhm. Right? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Any other thoughts? This side of the room needs some time here. Yeah, what are your thoughts? Any other ways that you see growth in the piece? We've talked about these ideas going up in terms of their arc discretely when we're looking at a motive, and the motive does this. But when we look at the tessitura, and we see like the juxtaposition, and what does it do? What does it do when the human voice is all the way up here versus lower? Like, what's the impact of that? So when he decides on those things, I also think it's really interesting to think about the choice of whether or not we lead with the mezzo or if we lead with the soprano. All of those things. What do you think about this? The departure from imitation. What do you think about that? Why do you think he did that? What's the text? Dum candebat. I don't remember what that means, but Filius means son. So, yeah, of course we want to look to that. How does that expression change the idea from the chain of suspensions where we're just stumbling together? Yeah, it's a temporary resolution. It's like a moment of clarity, right? Where we, and maybe, you know, I think all of those things, I guess what I'm trying to illustrate here when we look at this, where this is obviously a piece of music exquisitely crafted, worthy of study, that will yield great Easter eggs for us. When we look for those Easter eggs and we find great music, and it doesn't have to be complicated. There are beautiful, simple settings, like the Elaine Hagenberg Olaf, finding those things. But this is going to lead us to interpretation and to lead us to inspiring the imagination of our musicians. So that when we get to the moment of they know the significance of that in the structure of the piece. It's not just because the conductor feels that way, it's because the composer has led us. And it's a very powerful thing when we're able to, we walk into the rehearsal with some ideas, but then to solicit the ideas of our collaborative musicians that have rich imaginations. Anytime we open the floor to our students or to the people that sing in our ensembles, we grow from it. And my students always have insights into the score that I didn't catch. And so it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. Okay, so let's talk about mapping. And you have, and for those of you who brought your bifocals today, you're going to be glad. And for those of you who are like me that need to do this, go ahead and do this. I'm sorry that it's so small, but I wanted to make sure that we had them here. So we have two dimensions in terms of our map. Dimension one deals with the musical content, and we sort of brainstormed just now talking about our observations of the things that we would consider to be the primary characteristics of this piece of music. So, like, what are the things that are fluorescent about this piece of music? Well, goodness, the suspension to me is fluorescent, right? That's something. And so Dr. Snow has right here delineated some things that she's identified as the most important sort of topics. So do you see vocal challenges? I think as leaders, you're always going to have a vocal challenge part to your map, right? Because we're working with humans. She has ornamentation. So we're dealing with the Baroque, so ornamentation is something that we have to decide. The story narrates the experience of Mary as the mother. That's another topic. And then structure or form. We sort of talked about that with the inverted figures, how he motivically sets the different portions of text. And then vocal, well, what is it? Does that say vocal painting? Word painting, sorry, word painting, which is very important. So those are the things that she has identified as her most important teaching points. For any piece of music, you need to decide the why of your presentation. So why are you choosing a piece of music? Does anybody have a piece of music that they have programmed currently, or they are going to program, and there's a compelling why as to why they're programming it? Anyone have anything that they'd be willing to share? Is it too early in the year for you to, I know y'all have to plan in the summer, so. Anyone?
It sounds trite, but the piece I was taught as a child, yeah. I have a couple, she's a professional oboist, he's a professional cellist, and it's like, I have a chance. Yes, I have a chance.
That is not trite, that's called savvy. That's called savvy. Absolutely. You are programming based on the people in front of you. There was a piece of music I held on to for 15 years, and I never had the bass who could do it. And one day at Ohio State, someone knocked on the door. I opened the door, and a man who was 6'7" was standing there, and he said, "My name is Donnie. I want to be in choir." And I went, "I can do a child's prayer. Hi, Donnie," right? That was my first thought. That's horrible, but it was my first thought. But you know, I was also happy that he wants to sing, right? It's good, I'm glad. But I thought, I have the low E. The low E is here. And the low E is not always there in the choir. And this was a piece that was based on an unchanging low E. And so I knew I had to do it. And that, I built a program around that one piece because Donnie was in my choir. And I put a really smart musician right behind Donnie because Donnie was a music major. And they were sort of the puppet master and just gave Donnie all the notes. And then Donnie was the voice. Yeah, but that's a good reason to do it. Right, anyone else? Any other reason? Any other why for why you're programming? Anything?
I mean, simply, if you're looking at a worship sense,
Yeah.
Just playing your anthems around the sermon or
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's great. There's a topical why, right? What were you gonna say? Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, sure. Yeah, the breathing, absolutely. I think that's written into the score. No question. Yeah, yeah. Did anyone have any other, I want to make sure I hear from everybody about the programming piece of music. I say this to say that these often will drive your topic that you identify, right? That you're thinking about, what do I want my musicians to get out of this? And maybe you may be working, okay, I need to work to develop the rhythmic acuity of my choir, so I'm going to give them something that's challenging, so then rhythm would show up. So in turn, let's pick any one of these. Which one is most appealing to you? Because we won't have time to get through all of them. This is vocal challenges. Let's not do ornamentation, because that's not germane to most of us for most of our lives. Structure, form, vocal painting. Which rabbit trail do we want to go down? Okay, text painting, thank you. So let's go to word painting. So under this, she then identifies weeping motives and suspensions. So we might think, aren't the suspensions weeping motives? In her strata, she has separated them. When we think about that half step, the appoggiatura, is a weep. Okay, so I think she's referring to those, and then we have those chains of suspensions as well, right? Okay, so then she then goes, that next level, I keep holding it upside down, it tells you how bad my eyes are. I'm like, wow, I can't read this, it's because it's upside down. Yeah, so, for real. Okay, weeping motives. Number 1, assigned to Dolorosa Lacrimosa. They're representative of grief, and it suggests moaning or weeping. So she's defining what it is. And then if we go to map number 2 is a creation of strategies to communicate those musical ideas to the ensemble. So one map is the identification of the content. We need to teach the musicians in the ensemble about the suspensions or the weaving motives. It's at the heart of this piece of music. And then this is the how. So let's look to see how. But before we look at her answers, how might you teach a weaving motive to your ensemble? Well, which pitch is more prominent, the dissonant pitch or the resolution? The dissonant. Yeah, so thinking about what might be a strategy, maybe it's just having your musicians down go, would you all do that with me? And whatever octave suits you, okay? Whatever octave, oh my gosh, I sounded so Michigan, whatever octave suits you. I've been in Michigan for a few days. Here we go. So we're gonna go, try it. So it's a very simple little gesture. I'm down going on my viola or my cello, but that's something that we can have them do while they sing. That communicates down bow strength, up bow weakness, right? It's a strong and then it's a weak. And that's something that doesn't feel childish. We're working with adults often, but it will really allow them to engage. Okay, that's a way to teach it. Anybody else have another idea about how to teach an appoggiatura or a weak? Yeah.
I stand them up and lean into.
Oh, good.
I'm getting touchy.
Good. That's such a great tool, and it can work for the appoggiatura because we're wanting to lean into the dissonance. And if we have people that don't want to touch one another, we can have them imagine pushing, like pushing or pulling back. It's a great strategy. With the suspensions, a great strategy is to have both parts hold hands and pull in opposition if they're able. So it's soprano and an alto pulling as they lean through those. So let's see how Dr. Snow creates strategies for those. So weeping motives, model for the singers with and without emphasis on suspensions. So she's giving us that. Choir sings each iteration of the weeping motive. Sing weeping. Oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed that I did not bring my right glasses. Okay. So this is something you can alter the, I don't know if this is what she's saying because I haven't asked her about this, but you can do things like have them do a vowel and then hum the second one. So they really feel that. It's just a collection of strategies. The singer conducts the motive, emphasizing the suspension. Does the mapping dimension make sense? That dimension 1 is about identifying the content, and then dimension 2 is about preparing strategies in advance of the rehearsal, so that then you're prepared with multiple strategies. I think that this is really important to emphasize, that sometimes, and I've done this many times, that I think I have created a beautiful teaching strategy, that surely this will work. It's the only one I've prepared, and I get in and the thing just tanks. It does not do what I thought it was going to do, or I've interpreted the music and I'm fighting the music like, whoa, I thought I understood that. When we have multiple strategies, it's good for us to be self-effacing and to say, oh my gosh, okay, let's try something else. But then we can just move to something new and to say, try it this way, try it that way. Maybe we use a metaphor, maybe we use a word picture to teach the idea. Okay? So when it's all up here and it's easy to read up there. Cool. Okay. Good. Does the two-step process make sense? Great. Now let's talk just for a minute. We're going to talk about learning styles. So the spinning out of strategies for future action. There they are together. So when we think about the types of learners that we are, there are people who believe we have different types of learners, and then there are people who believe we don't have different types of learners. That's a myth. How many of you are familiar with terms like a kinesthetic learner, a visual learner, right? A visual learner, an oral learner. I bet you can self-identify your primary mode where you feel most resonance, right? How many kinesthetic learners do we have in the room? Visual learners, we advice to all of us is to try to do all of them. That when we're creating strategies for the rehearsal moment, we're imagining, how can I get a twofer? Like maybe I'll do a word picture. I'd never do this in rehearsal, but I'm just gonna try to make you giggle. Can you sing Over the Rainbow, right? So there's hand involvement here, and there is the image in their mind of a rainbow, right? Well, what the heck does that mean? That's not specific at all, but I'm addressing different realms of learning. Does that make sense? I'll often pair it with modeling. So if I'm asking people to sing something, can you do that? Here we go. Good. Boop, 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 boop. Good. Okay, excellent. So just having multiple strategies so that people are never really aware, but we're tricking them to do things, right? We do want them to be aware. Yeah, cool. Any questions? Any questions? Cool, okay. Let me, and when I will say, when I started, that's the end of the thing. When I started as a new conductor, I would make a map for every piece of music. We've got about 5 minutes left. But I would make a map for every piece of music. And what I would say is if you don't have time to do that, that's not realistic, and some of you don't need to do that, what I would suggest that you do is that you create some kind of compendium of rehearsal strategies that you have used that work well, or that you have observed. So let's take intonation for a moment. Let's just imagine that our altos are singing out of tune. What are some strategies to address intonation? And feel free to couple your strategy with what you believe might be causation in this imaginary scenario. Like what causes altos to sing out of tune? Singing too high, right? Right, so the vowel is the issue. So it's very spread. So what are some strategies to narrow the vowel? Anybody?
Lift their face, lift their eyebrows.
So there's a whole room here of ideas on that. We've got people doing this. Anyone else? Yeah. And so much of these things, what's so tricky about what we do is it's all internal, right? It is all internal, and so we can't see the folds. We can't say, oh, your left fold is a little wonky, and you go, put some resin on that. That's not how it works. So we really do have to try to understand this. So that's one strategy. We can also, take our hand and have people sing and do this. I'm fairly mindful of asking people to move too many things out here because sometimes that can create some tensions in our musicians. And I will say that I have heard more than one youngster come in to sing at the university, and I'll never forget this rhyme. Oh, Christmas tree, because he had been taught to do that. And you could sing a beautiful e-vowel without doing that. So I'm always mindful of that. It is good to have people think this way. I absolutely agree with that. So bring hands here. And keep in mind, too, that those things are internal. Yeah, so if you start a running log, what are some things that I can do to address things? In the rehearsal, if you have a beautiful rehearsal plan about intonation, you are prepared. If they sing anything out of tune, you've got the anecdote, or the antidote, not the anecdote. And then you get in rehearsal and they sing it all in tune. What do? Well, since you made a map, you just go to a different bubble. You just go to a different bubble and you work on a different strategy. And there are oftentimes things that we don't always anticipate that will be problems. And what this can do is it can help you to better prepare for the things that are unexpected. Okay? Cool. Any other questions or thoughts? Tomorrow we're going to take Elaine Hagenberg's Oh Love and analyze it after we do a little score study talk. It's not difficult to analyze, FYI. It's very diatonic. And then we're going to create some rehearsal strategies and some rehearsal scenarios that we anticipate. How many of you have conducted Oh Love? So you're going to come in with a lot of information about the vocal faults. I will say I've probably only heard one choir